She woke up before the alarm. She always did. Not because she was a morning person. She wasn't, not really, but because her mind never fully stopped. Even in sleep, some part of her was listening, waiting, anticipating the moment when someone would need something, and she would have to be ready. Her name was Laura, 35 years old, dark hair that she kept tied back because there was never time to think about it. A small apartment on the 4th floor of a building she had chosen specifically because it was close to her mother, close to her sister, close to the office, close to everyone who needed her. She made coffee, 2 cups by habit, though she lived alone. The second cup was always cold by the time she remembered it. That morning, like most mornings, she sat at the kitchen table for exactly 7 minutes before her phone started. A message from her sister, then one from her mother, then a notification from work. Someone needed the quarterly report moved up. Someone needed coverage for a meeting. Someone needed. Laura read each message carefully, typed her responses. Calm, clear, helpful. She didn't notice that she hadn't finished her coffee. She never did. People who knew Laura used the same words to describe her. Reliable, strong, always there. Her co-workers said she was the one who kept the team together. Her family said she was the one who kept everything running. Her friends, the few she had time for, said she was the kind of person you could call at 2 in the morning and she would answer, and she would listen, and she would know exactly what to say. What none of them said, because none of them thought to ask, was how she was doing. Not the surface answer. Not that I'm fine, just busy, that she kept ready like a reflex. But really, how she was doing, what she carried, what it felt like to be Laura on the inside in the quiet spaces between all the helping. That question never came. And Laura never asked for it. She had learned a long time ago that her role was to be the answer, not the question. That strength meant availability. That love meant sacrifice. That the moment you put down someone else's weight, you became a burden yourself. She had learned this so well, so completely, that she no longer recognized it as something she had learned. It felt like truth. It felt like who she was. Her mother had called her my little rock since she was 9 years old. It started the year her father left. Laura remembered the morning he was gone. A specific silence in the apartment, different from regular silence, heavier. Her mother sitting at the kitchen table in her robe, not moving. Her younger sister, 6 years old, crying in the bedroom for reasons she didn't fully understand. Laura had stood in the hallway between them, 9 years old, a child herself, and she had made a decision, not consciously, not with words, but in the way that children make the deepest decisions with their whole bodies, that she would not cry, that someone had to hold things together, and it would be her, that her mother needed a rock, and she would become one. She made her sister breakfast. She told her a story about why Daddy was away. She held her mother's hand until her mother stopped shaking. She never cried that day, or the days after. Somewhere in the praise that followed, my little rock, what would we do without you? You're so strong, Laura. So strong. She found something that felt like love, like safety, like proof that she was enough. She chased that feeling for the next 26 years. At work, she was a senior coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company. The title didn't fully capture what she did, which was essentially to absorb the chaos that other people generated and transform it quietly into order. When her manager made a mistake in the budget projections, it was Laura who stayed late to fix them. When 2 colleagues had a conflict that threatened to derail a project, it was Laura who mediated, who translated, who smoothed the edges until everyone could work together again. When someone on the team was struggling with a deadline, with a personal issue, with confidence, Laura noticed before anyone else, and Laura helped. She was good at it, genuinely good. There was something that felt almost meditative about solving other people's problems. It gave her a sense of purpose, of direction. As long as she was helping, she knew exactly who she was. The problem she couldn't see yet, or wouldn't let herself see, was that she had no idea who she was when she wasn't. It started with small things. She began waking up earlier, 3 in the morning, 4, lying in the dark, her mind already running to the day ahead, cataloging what needed to be done, who needed what, where she had to be. She told herself it was just stress, a busy period. Things would settle. They didn't settle. She started forgetting things. Small things at first. Where she put her keys, whether she'd eaten lunch, the name of a colleague she'd worked with for 3 years. She covered for these lapses automatically, the way she covered for everything, with extra preparation, extra lists, extra effort. The headaches came next. Not sharp, dramatic headaches. Something duller and more persistent. A pressure behind her eyes that started sometime around Tuesday and didn't fully lift until Friday night, when she allowed herself briefly to stop. She made a doctor's appointment, canceled it, rescheduled, canceled again. There was always something more important. Someone who needed her more urgently. She bought ibuprofen in bulk. Her friend Diane noticed first. They had lunch together once a month, a ritual they'd maintained since university. 20 years ago, the restaurant changed, the details changed, but the ritual stayed. 1 hour, usually on a Wednesday, where the world was supposed to pause. That afternoon, Diane watched Laura across the table and felt something she couldn't quite name. Not worry exactly, something more like recognition, like seeing a familiar thing in an unfamiliar state. "You look tired," Diane said. "I'm fine," Laura said. Immediately, reflexively, the way you say a word so many times it loses its meaning. Diane looked at her for a moment. "I didn't ask if you were fine. I said you look tired." Laura smiled. "I've just been busy. Work is a lot right now. My mother's been having some health issues. Maria's going through that thing with her ex again, so I've been." "Laura, what?" "I asked about you." A pause. Fractional. The kind you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. "I know," Laura said. "I'm okay. Really." Diane let it go. She always did, because Laura seemed so certain, so composed, that challenging her felt somehow aggressive, like pressing a bruise that the person insisted wasn't there. What Diane didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that in that fraction of a pause, something had moved in Laura, something small, a crack, barely visible, in a wall she had spent decades building. She thought about it on the drive home. She turned the radio up. March became April. April became the kind of May that promises warm but delivers rain. Laura's sister called her one Sunday afternoon, crying about a fight with her husband. Laura sat on the edge of her bed and listened for an hour and 20 minutes. She gave advice that was measured and careful and probably right. She didn't hang up until her sister felt better. When the call ended, she sat in the silence of her apartment and noticed something strange. She couldn't remember what she had been doing before the phone rang. She couldn't remember if she'd eaten. She couldn't find the thread of her own afternoon. It was such a small thing, such an ordinary moment of disorientation. But something about it frightened her, not the forgetting itself. She had been forgetting things for months, but the feeling underneath it, the sudden, vertiginous sense of not knowing where she ended and everyone else began. She went to the kitchen, stood at the counter for a long moment, made the second cup of coffee, let it go cold. The collapse, when it finally came, didn't look like what she had imagined. She had always assumed, in the vague way that people assume things they don't want to examine, that if she ever broke down it would be dramatic, a visible rupture, something that would explain itself and announce itself and be obvious. It wasn't like that. It was a Tuesday, an ordinary Tuesday in late May. She was at her desk at work, going through emails, when her colleague David stopped by to ask about a shipment report. She knew the answer. She had processed that report herself the previous afternoon. She opened her mouth to tell him. Nothing came. Not the words. She had the words. She had the information. But between knowing the answer and being able to produce it, there was suddenly a vast blank space, like trying to walk through a door and finding that the door was a wall. David waited. She could see him waiting. She could see the slight confusion on his face. Laura, she looked at the screen, at the report, at the numbers she had entered herself. She stopped. "I need a minute." She stood up, walked to the bathroom, stood at the sink and ran cold water over her wrists and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked like herself. She looked exactly like herself. Same dark hair, same careful face, same composed expression that she had worn like armor for 35 years. But something was wrong. Something beneath the surface. Something that the mirror couldn't show her, but that she could feel now. Undeniably, the way you can feel a fracture before the bone breaks. Her hands were shaking. She turned off the tap, dried her hands, stood very still. And for the first time in a very long time, maybe for the first time since she was 9 years old, standing in a hallway between a grieving mother and a frightened sister, Laura asked herself a question. Not what do they need? Not what should I do? But how am I? The answer came fast. Too fast. As though it had been waiting just behind the question. Pressing against it for years. She was exhausted. Not tired. Not stressed. Not busy. Exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't touch. Exhausted in the cells. Exhausted in the architecture of who she had made herself be. She gripped the edge of the sink. Her reflection looked back at her. And then, quietly, without drama, without anyone to witness it, Laura began to cry. Not the controlled, composed tears she occasionally allowed herself in private. Something older than that. Something from much further down. A sound she didn't recognize as her own voice at first, because she had never heard herself make it before. She slid down against the wall until she was sitting on the cold bathroom floor, her back against the cabinet, her knees pulled to her chest. She cried for her mother, who had needed a rock when she was 9 years old, and Laura had become one without being asked. She cried for her sister, who had learned to call Laura the way you call a hotline. In crisis, in need, expecting an answer. She cried for every meeting she had stayed late for, every call she had taken at midnight. Every time someone had said, "You're so strong," and she had taken it as a compliment instead of a sentence. She cried because she was 35 years old, and she did not know, genuinely did not know, what she would say if someone asked her what she needed. She cried because no one had asked. She cried because she had never let them. She stayed on that floor for a long time, long enough that someone knocked on the bathroom door, asked if everything was okay, and she said yes, one final reflex, one last performance, before the irony of it reached her, and something almost like a laugh mixed with the crying. Yes, fine, I'm fine. She was not fine, and for the first time, she knew it, really knew it. Not as information, but as something felt, something that lived in her body and could not be managed away or scheduled around or solved with a second cup of cold coffee. She wasn't fine, and that, strangely, terrifyingly, with a quality that felt almost like relief, was the most honest thing she had said in years. Later, she would try to explain it to Diane. They were in the same restaurant, same Wednesday ritual, but something was different. Laura's hair was down. She hadn't planned it. She'd simply forgotten to tie it back, and then decided, for reasons she couldn't fully articulate, to leave it. She told Diane about the bathroom, about the floor, about the crying she didn't recognize as her own. Diane was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Why didn't you tell me it was that bad?" And Laura looked at her, really looked at her, without the armor, without the reflex, and said something she had never said out loud before. "I didn't know I was allowed to." The words landed strangely, not with the weight of revelation, but with the quiet weight of something true, something obvious, almost, something that should have been said a long time ago. Diane reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't say, "You're so strong." She didn't say, "I'm sure you'll figure it out." She didn't fill the space with reassurance. She just held her hand in the ordinary light of a Wednesday afternoon and let Laura be something she had never quite been allowed to be before. Not a rock, not a solution, not the one who held everything together, just a person, tired and human, and still, despite everything here, this is not a story about weakness. Laura was not weak. She was never weak. That was never the problem. The problem was something quieter and more insidious. The belief, absorbed so early that it felt like instinct, that strength and silence were the same thing. That needing help was the same as failing. That the moment you put down the weight you were carrying, you would become a burden to the people you loved. She had carried that belief for 26 years. It had cost her in ways she was only beginning to count. There's someone you know who is like Laura, maybe more than one. Maybe you pass them every day, at work, at home, in the mirror. The person who answers every call, who shows up for everyone, who says "I'm fine" before you finish asking. The person who has been carrying something so long they've forgotten what it feels like to put it down. We celebrate that person. We rely on that person. We say, what would we do without you? And mean it is love, and it is love. But it is also quietly a cage, because the things we celebrate become the things people feel they cannot stop doing. And the things we never ask about become the things people believe they cannot say. Laura didn't fix everything in an afternoon. That's not how it works. The walls that take decades to build don't come down in a single moment of crying on a bathroom floor. But she made one small change. When someone asked how she was, the next day and the day after that, she paused before answering. She let the question land instead of deflecting it. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes she said something true. I'm tired. It's been a hard week. Actually, could I talk to you about something? Small things, ordinary things. But for Laura, they were the hardest things she had ever done. She still makes 2 cups of coffee in the morning, but lately sometimes she drinks them both.